Today, on this episode, I'm going to share with you what I've come up with called the 7 stages of physician entrepreneurship. Being an entrepreneur can be difficult, especially for doctors, because you're not getting a very linear path. If you know what stage you're at, it'll be crucial for you to better understand what is you need to do to get to the next step. So I want to give you some insight on this podcast episode. Let's cover the 7 stages of physician entrepreneurship on this episode of Bootstrap MD. Hey guys, Dr. Mike Wu Ming. Welcome to another edition of Bootstrap MD. My name is Dr. Mike Wu Ming. I'm a physician and entrepreneur. Going to about 25 years, I've been an entrepreneur and 20 plus years of being a physician. And I've started lots of different businesses, started brick and mortar businesses, started online businesses. I've had a lot of failures, had a few successes, and I want to share with you what I've learned along the way on this journey. I'm passionate about physician entrepreneurship, and recently I got to speak to a really fun group of physician entrepreneurs at Peter Kim's Leverage and Growth Accelerator Summit that occurred in Austin, Texas. And what I'm going to be sharing with you is the basic presentation that I give, which I entitled The 7 Stages of Physician Entrepreneurship. Now, since I've had the podcast, I believe it was either my first or second episode, I covered what I called the 4 financial levels of physician. And since then, I've expanded it to these stages of physician entrepreneurship. Now, why is it important for you to understand the 7 stages? Because I think it gives you some insight about where you're at and what you need to do to get to the next stage. You know, as I mentioned at the beginning, medicine is a linear path. We know the exact same steps that we need to do to become a doctor. We need to be pre-med or take biology or major in biochemistry or chemistry, some type of science. We have to do some type of volunteer work. We have to have great grades. We have to pass our MCATs. We have to learn to interview well. Then we go into medical school. We have to do well on our different rotations. We try to get honors in certain rotations, especially with those where we want to specialize. We need to get into residency and then eventually get into a job. So the path is pretty much laid out. In entrepreneurship, not so much. So by giving you this insight, it allowed you to, what I didn't realize, to see what stage you're at and what you need to do to get to the next level. So I wish I had these stages when I first got started with entrepreneurship. You know, I was doing it at a time when very few people were actually talking about it. Very few doctors were actually discussing about other ways to build businesses outside of medicine. And hopefully you'll get some benefit from it, because I think after you do this exercise, it'll give you some better decision making about what you need to do next. So the first stage is the physician as a entrepreneur. Now, we recently discussed what a entrepreneur is on a previous podcast episode. It's the largest group, and as we're going up the stages, the first few stages are going to be large, but in comparison to all of physicians, a physician entrepreneur, we're a very small group. Entrepreneur is someone who wants to be an entrepreneur. It's not the nicest title in the world. They are constantly in research mode. They're buying courses, and they feel if they buy courses, then that gets them closer. But if they never implement or take action from the courses, they're really just kind of running in circles. I think courses are shelf help. Like, you put it on the shelf and you don't look at it ever again. If you're always in research mode, the best research is actually implementing things. You can make more decisions by actually testing things out, by buying Facebook or Google ads and actually testing out whether the program or course or coaching program that you're going to be doing is actually going to sell, rather than just thinking about it. As I've mentioned many times, life is not a double placebo study. So hopefully you're not on that level. If you've been listening to the podcast, hopefully you are to at least to the second level, which is physician with side gig. I'm not the biggest fan of the word side gig, but a lot of people use the term side gig. I prefer side business. For me, gig is just a kind of a slang word for a job that lasts a specific period of time. Like your side gig is you're working at Uber. You're not necessarily want to become a full-time Uber driver, but you're kind of doing it because it helps pay the bills and you're making good money with it. Even hustle. I've heard the term side hustles. Hustle to me kind of reminds me of something you're doing illegal or nefarious. So I prefer the word side business because when people use the word gig, it reminds me that it's more of a hobby. You wouldn't call practicing medicine as your side gig, right? Because you feel that's your serious career, that's your life's work, right? So I think if you have a side business, your goal should be considering a side business, a part-time business that you eventually want to become a full-time business. Personally, I would never try to start a side gig for me if it didn't bring in at least $10,000 a month in some type of income and hopefully passive income. Now, there's one exception I do make for a side gig that doesn't make that much money is I have two side businesses where I'm leveraging the side business because it allows me to work on other parts of my businesses. So one is, and I mentioned this in the past, that I do some work for the California Medical Board where I work with physicians who are on probation. And the reason why this is important to me is these physicians work in my industry. They work in the aesthetics industry, and it also keeps me on my toes on what the medical board is actually, looking at or concentrating on. So it protects me and my business. The second type of side business I'm involved in is I am a trainer and proctor for a hormone pellet therapy company. It's something that I've used in my own clinic, and it helps me attract not only new patients, but I also get an insight and see what other practices are doing. And I'm helping get this particular company, more people learn more about it. So, and then ultimately it helps my own practice. So, I know the term physician with side gigs is used often, but it just makes me think that you're just kind of doing this as a hobby. And I want you to get out of that mindset, And often people who are in the stage don't really have a clear vision on what's next. The next stage is the self-employed physician. So this is your typical solo practice owner. This could be the doctor who works on telemedicine. This could be the locum tenens doctor working as an independent contractor. He's not working for anybody else. His entire income is based on his business. Now, you definitely are more risk averse. You tend to do everything by yourself. Your income is limited by how many patients you see, but the good part is you're finally becoming your own boss. As I mentioned, this is where you have a lot of solo practice owners, and I know some solo practitioners that, they can never really sell the business because once they leave, the business basically collapses and dies. But you definitely you're taking control of what you want to do, and then you can decide how much or how little you want to work. So this is pretty easy to understand. The next stage 4, is the physician as the business owner. This business is generally in their own practice or in a related field. This is kind of their solo practice doctor that I mentioned, but now they've got some ancillary staff. Staff is usually limited to 3 to 5, and they're mostly ancillary staff. They might have an RN that might be bringing in some income. For the most part, they're still making most of the income for the business. It's still dependent on how many patients you see. If the doctor goes on vacation, the business can suffer. But they're hiring other people, which allows them to delegate a bit more. Still, if they try to sell it, it would be very difficult for someone to purchase it. Because again, it's same as the previous stage is if if they leave, then the business kind of stops making income. Now, most never doctors never get past this stage, stage 4.
As a doctor, I wasn't used to asking for help, especially when it came to subjects outside of medicine. But then I found physiciancoaches.com. In an instant, I found hundreds of experts to help me in all aspects of life. On areas I was afraid to ask: dealing with burnout, starting a side gig, money management, even help with my marriage. And the best part? Nearly all experts are physicians themselves. After reading their profile and a quick chat, I knew I found the right mentor for me. At physiciancoaches.com, help from professional colleagues is just a click away.
So let's go on to where I want to see you go, is to at least get onto stage 5, which is the physician as the CEO. This is where your income is not dependent on being there day to day. Your job is now overseeing the whole business. You might have it in a practice, you might have an office manager. So, for example, that's where I've been running for the last few years as the CEO. I am on med spas, and the clinics can be open, but I don't necessarily have to be there. In fact, I'm generally there, maybe 4 to 8 hours a week. I have a one company that's non patient brick and mortar practice. I have a marketing company. We just had 4 new clients that joined, and I don't even know who they really are because we have salespeople who help bring in the income. And I always had, when I created my businesses, is that I created it so I didn't have to be the sole income earner. I could be easily replaced. And in my clinics, I have nurse practitioners, I've had PAs, I've had registered nurses who are able to bring in income, and not necessarily I have to be physically in that location. And the idea again was to create it where it's making money, and when people are looking to, private equity firms are looking in, they want to know if they can come in and you don't have to be there, and that allows your business to be more sellable. There's a funny phrase that I was talking to another doctor. He says, if I need to see all the patient, then that's a problem for my business. And for one example that I can also share with you, my dad has his own practice, and you realize, there are very difficult times when doctors, we have to let go of control, and let's face it, they don't make it very easy for us to, they want the doctor to make all the control. That's why we take a lot of the risk. But when my dad's medical practice, when he started hiring other doctors, he realized he was making more money, and when he would stop seeing patients, and he allowed him to work more on his business. Famous book called The E-Myth talks about working on your business than in your business. Now, you might think that's good. You're the CEO, but what could be above that? Well, the next step is what I call physician as the investor. And that's when you're investing in multiple businesses. You're using your capital, you're using your cash flow, and you're investing in other businesses. One of my mentors, his goal is to be the minority owner in multiple businesses. It's like the difference between when Shaquille O'Neal came into the NBA. They asked him, "Wow, how's it like?" Because he came from a pretty impoverished background. How's it like to be rich? He says, "I'm not rich. I may be rich, but I'd rather be wealthy." Like Oprah is wealthy because she has her production company. She's got multiple shows. She's got various investments. And that's what I've been my goal has been is, I worked with a company called Massage Envy, which is a big massage franchise. And what I learned about that were these people who actually own these Massage Envies, where they didn't just own one Massage Envy franchise. They usually own like 5 franchises in Massage Envy, and then they would also own like 4 Dunkin' Donuts and 6 McDonald's and different types of businesses. And I realized that how they were bringing in their wealth, it really didn't matter what the actual business is. They had all these service-based businesses. They were not the ones providing the service. A human was providing some type of service. They did some type of service that make money at the end of the day, and they own lots of these different types of businesses. And that's where I wanted to. That's where my mind was getting to, is to be the owner of multiple different businesses. That's why I expanded, my clinic. We have now 3 locations, and getting to that point where I could eventually be a minority owner in different types of businesses. And that's what I have with a marketing company and another company that I've recently started, a marketing company and a consulting company. And that's where I want to be, where I don't have to be the one providing all of the services. And this is when, when you're at that place, retirement is a realistic goal for an entrepreneur. And I tell physicians that to stop thinking of themselves as just a physician, but think of them as an investor. So if you go to my LinkedIn page, I call myself as investor, because that's what I am today, is investing in multiple businesses. And, I've been made it a point to look at other businesses that I could be investing in that produce this multiple streams of income. And then finally, the last stage is what I call physician as the involved in generational wealth. So this is when an entrepreneur uses other people's money, idea, and talent to create wealth. And it's really where what I consider the last stage is like the retired entrepreneur, that they're not only building wealth for themselves, they're building it for generations to come. So if you're involved in real estate, that's often about generational wealth. If you're, I know doctors who own, multiple houses and hotels that are bringing in wealth not only for themselves, but they're also setting up the next generation, their kids' generation. And this is independently wealthy. And now what they're sharing is their time and teaching the next generation about entrepreneurship. They're working as a mentor. They're paying it forward. So stage 7 for me is kind of what that retired entrepreneur is. So to sum up the 7 stages, the first is the watchpreneur. The second is the physician with the side gig, which I hate the word side business. The third is the self-employed physician. The fourth is a physician as a business owner. Fifth is a physician as CEO. Sixth is a physician as the investor. They're a minority owner. They own lots of different businesses. And then 7 is physician as a general wealth entrepreneur. So what stage are you? I'd love to hear from you what stage you're at. Because what that's going to do, it's going to let you know what I consider is the crucial step. So I want to go over what I consider is the crucial step with each stage. So if you're an entrepreneur and you want to get to be a physician as a side gig, hey, the first thing you got to do is that you actually have a business. And it's what my mentor, John Reese, calls, you need some type of validation. And he called it making your first dollar. It's like someone's actually paying you for that product and service. Now, that is your validation. That's going to help you get to that physician as a side gig. You're actually getting paid for that product or service that you're doing. This is when you want to identify what are the obstacles that are preventing you from getting to the next stage. Oftentimes it's themselves, right? It's yourself. It's your limiting beliefs. It's your overthinking it. It's your fear of failure, your fear of success, wanting to be anonymous in a business. All things that I mentioned multiple times on this podcast. But the most important thing is that you've actually sold something in your business to get to that next step. So how do you go from a side gig to becoming self-employed? Well, there's multiple factors. One is you need the confidence to get out on your own. You need to consider financial situations to make sure that you are able to do it. You want to go from taking this as just a hobby to having desire to grow this as a full-time business. Then how do you go from being self-employed to becoming a business owner? Well, now that's pretty easy. You just need to hire more people. You need to be willing to delegate. You need to be accepting losing control. It could just get started by just having a virtual assistant, 1 or 2 employees, and that's how you get to that next level. So from number 4, from a business owner to becoming a CEO, this is probably the most crucial step is you got to find replacement. You got to find someone who can be you, whether it be another doctor, whether it be a mid-level provider, a nurse, whether it be someone actually taking stuff away in other parts of your business. If you're a coach, you have someone who can coach for you. And that didn't say it was going to be easy, but those are the steps that you need to do, especially when you want to actually sell that business, which I've always said is the ultimate goal for any type of business, to actually sell that business. How do you go from being a CEO to becoming an investor, going from stage 5 to stage 6? You need to have standard operating procedures. This is when you're getting to the next level. You need to have SOPs, because that's what, when I've been talking with investors, that's what they're looking at the business. Do you have standard operating procedures so that that business can be fully functional, it can run on its own? Do you have a board of directors? Are you at a point where you could actually sell your business? That's when you're going from being a CEO and just kind of managing that one big business, and now you're managing multiple businesses. And then going from number 6 investor to number 7, stage 7, a generational wealth entrepreneur, is just the willingness to teach others. This is when you're retired and you want to pay it forward. What I feel is the most important step of every single one, going from stage 1 to stage 2, stage 2 to stage 3, is having a mentor, having someone along the way who's been there, done that, who is at a higher stage than you. That's why I'm such a fan of masterminds. I'm in one mastermind where to get in, you have to make at least 7 figures. You have to make $1 million a year in your business, because you're learning from mentors who are making 10 million and above. Those are the type of situations where, and I'm not saying money is the end all be all, but that's the type of situation where you want to learn from others who have got the experience, who know what it is to be at that higher stage, knows what it is to own multiple businesses if you're just starting out with your first business. That's the ideal situation that you want to be. And you want to collaborate with these folks. And, the old adage, right? We are the average of the 5 people that we hang around with. And if you're around people who are negative and just kind of the vampires that are just kind of sucking the life away from you, you got to be in a situation where you can aspire to be with people who are above at a higher level. I've always said the great masterminds is where you're the dumbest person in the room, and that's where you want to be. So, what stage are you? I'd love to hear from you. Drop me a line at bootstrapmd.com. See what kind of stage you are and what you need to do to get to the next level. I hope this helped you out. Again, entrepreneurship is not a linear path. You're going to have your ups and your downs. At the end of the day, it's about getting up off your feet and keep moving forward.